The room is quiet. The argument is over, at least on the surface. One person paces. Another mutters under their breath. And then silence. Not awkward, not hesitant, not waiting for a response. Just stillness. Complete stillness. This silence is heavy, almost tangible. It lingers. It says something without words. And for those observing, it can feel confusing, infuriating, or even threatening. Why do some people respond to conflict with silence rather than explanation? Why does the instinct to speak, defend, or clarify vanish for certain individuals? The answer lies deep in psychology. The people who stay silent after arguments are not always unfeeling. They are not necessarily avoiding accountability. Their silence is often a learned response, a strategic mechanism, or a deeply wired emotional pattern. And understanding it reveals something profound about emotion, attachment, and human coping strategies. One common profile emerges clearly. These individuals retreat into silence as a way to regulate their own emotions. Imagine a person whose heart is racing, hands trembling, or chest tightening after a heated conversation. Speaking feels impossible, not because they don't have words, but because the words might come out in a way they later regret. Psychologically, this is emotion-driven withdrawal. The brain prioritizes stability over immediate engagement. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for reasoning, can become overwhelmed by the amygdala's emotional alarm. When that happens, silence becomes a temporary refuge. The intent here is not avoidance of the other person. It is self-preservation. Words are paused until the mind regains equilibrium. For this type, silence is a form of emotional first aid. It prevents escalation, protects relationships from rash reactions, and allows internal processing to occur. Then there's another profile, shaped by experience rather than immediate emotion. Some individuals have learned, often unconsciously, that speaking after conflict can be futile. Perhaps arguments in childhood or adolescence ended in ridicule, punishment, or dismissal. Maybe expressing perspective was ignored, minimized, or punished. The psychology behind this is learned inhibition. Silence becomes a default response because speaking doesn't reliably produce understanding. It is safer, less draining, and, importantly, less likely to provoke further conflict. This mindset often manifests as reflective stillness. These individuals are processing internally, evaluating every angle, and planning the next step carefully. Their silence is strategic rather than impulsive. For them, words are tools, not reflexes. Choosing when to use them is paramount. Another profile shows how attachment style influences post-argument behavior. Individuals with avoidant attachment tendencies often withdraw after conflict. Imagine someone who instinctively values independence, emotional space, and control over intimacy. In the wake of an argument, they may physically stay present, but emotionally disconnect. Psychologically, this withdrawal serves multiple purposes. It prevents perceived loss of control, maintains autonomy, and reduces vulnerability. Silence is protective, a buffer against overwhelming intimacy or emotional exposure. This is not indifference. It is a boundary, a clearly defined zone of emotional regulation that ensures they don't overextend or feel consumed by conflict. Then there is the contemplative type. Some people stay silent not from fear or avoidance, but from reflective processing. The argument has triggered questions, doubts, or new insights. The mind is actively analyzing, comparing perspectives, and planning what to communicate next. Speaking immediately could result in superficial, reactive, or incomplete statements. Psychologically, this is cognitive patience. The brain values accuracy, clarity, and intentionality over immediate verbal output. Silence allows for deliberate thought, increasing the likelihood that when communication resumes, it will be constructive. For this type, silence is not emptiness, it is incubation. The mind is working, even if the lips are still. There is also a subtle social calibration at play. Some individuals remain silent because they are attuned to the social dynamics surrounding the argument. Perhaps one person is domineering, highly emotional, or historically dismissive. Speaking immediately could escalate tension or be strategically disadvantageous. Silence becomes a form of social intelligence, a way to gauge, observe, and plan. In this case, the psychology is strategic regulation, combining emotional control with social awareness. Silence is a tool, a conscious choice to protect relationships or personal well-being. A common misconception is that silence signals hostility or resentment. In reality, the psychology shows it often signals the opposite: restraint, self-awareness, and care. The silent individual may be holding back anger, preventing harm, or creating space for a more thoughtful resolution. Silence is not the absence of engagement. It can be a form of deep engagement that happens internally rather than externally. Interestingly, prolonged silence can also serve as a mirror. Those who stay quiet often indirectly communicate how much reflection, consideration, or emotional labor is occurring inside. The other party may interpret the silence in different ways: frustration, confusion, or even guilt. But psychologically, it represents processing and potential readiness to communicate effectively when the time is right. It's important to remember that these profiles are not mutually exclusive. A single individual may combine emotional regulation, learned inhibition, attachment patterns, reflective processing, and strategic social calibration all at once. Silence can be layered, dynamic, and highly context-dependent. Understanding this helps remove judgment from interpersonal conflicts. Silence is not always a weapon. It is often a window into deeper cognitive and emotional mechanisms. So what does it mean when someone stays silent after an argument? It often reflects a need for self-regulation and emotional stabilization, learned strategies from past experiences, attachment-driven boundaries, deliberate cognitive processing, strategic social awareness, not coldness, not avoidance for avoidance's sake, not indifference. It reflects how some minds navigate emotion, communication, and relationship dynamics, prioritizing internal processing before external expression. For those observing such silence, it can be tempting to fill the gap with assumptions. But the psychology shows that silence is rarely meaningless. It is rarely empty. It is often a signal of patience, care, and internal engagement. The mind is active, not absent. The individual is present, not withdrawn. It is a reminder that not all communication happens in words, and that understanding human behavior often requires listening to the pauses as much as the speech. Which profile resonates most? Is it the emotionally regulated, the reflectively contemplative, or the strategically withdrawn? How does this perspective shift the way silence is interpreted in conflicts? When silence is recognized as a form of processing rather than avoidance, arguments can become opportunities for understanding rather than sources of frustration. And that understanding is precisely the lens psychology provides, a way to see human behavior not as mysterious or obstructive, but as logical, adaptive, and deeply human. If this exploration offered insight, reflection, or a new lens on interpersonal dynamics, continuing the conversation helps illuminate the hidden patterns behind everyday behaviors, one silent pause at a time.